everyone, welcome back to my channel. So I managed to get a little bit of beef from the store and I'm going to be making a beef stew. I like beef stews that are vegetable heavy, so I don't just put meat and potatoes, I do put a lot of other items into it, and I like it very flavorful. So let me show you what I'll be using. So I do have a little over a pound of meat. I found it at the store already trimmed and cut, but you can find a chuck roast and trim it and cut it yourself. I am going to be dredging it in some seasoned flour, so basically flour with salt and pepper. And then my vegetables, I'm going to start on the right here. I have potato, celery, carrot. I'm going to be using a couple of fresh tomatoes, and then I have some mushroom that I need to get used. Then I have some pearl onions and peas that I will put in a little bit later on. For my liquid, I'm going to be using some beef broth. If you have beef bouillon, you can use it. If not, just, I guess, resort to chicken broth. And then I have some red wine, and I will be seasoning with some bay leaf. I have a serrano chile. I have some thyme, garlic, peppercorn, and I will be finishing it off with some parsley. So I'm going to start by prepping my vegetables, and I do want them in fairly large pieces. The mushrooms I'll just cut in half. The potato I will also probably just quarter. I just want them in big chunks because it's going to be cooking for a while. I don't want them to disintegrate completely. I want them to keep their shape. Same thing for the carrot and celery. I'm basically going to clean them up and then cut them in large pieces. So I'm going to keep the leaves on my celery just because they're in really good condition and they just add some aromatic to the stew, which I do like. And I mean, you can always pick it out later, but for purposes of cooking, I'm going to leave them on. But I do string them because even after they cook for a long time, they just tend to get stuck in your teeth, and I don't really like that, so I get rid of it. For the potato, I'm just going to, okay, I will cut them in quarters. You can even leave them in half. I mean, the longer they stay in the oven, they will cook just fine. And I'm not peeling them because the skin is really thin on this, so I just scrub them really well. I'm using Roma tomato. I do want to get the seeds out, and I'm gonna dice this, and this will be kind of to start my base for the stew. So I'm gonna dredge the meat in flour, and this is gonna help thicken the stew later on. And I'm going to sear it in my pot. I have it coming up over medium heat. So I have a bit of olive oil in the bottom of my pan, and I'm just going to go ahead and brown this. I'm not going to overcrowd it, so just if you have to do it in batches, go ahead. My pot is not that big. And then I do recommend a heavy bottomed, either cast iron or enameled pot. Mine is cast iron. If you're not sure what to look for, I'll have a couple of things linked in the description box so you could check it out. So you just want to get some color on them and then take it out. I've also preheated my oven in the meantime. I'm heating it to 350. I pulled my meat out of the pot and just let it hang out to the side right now. And then I'm going to add my tomato. I'm going to add my wine. And I'm going to say that was about, I don't know, half a cup for sure. 3/4 of a cup. And I just want to get this in here because I want to get all the bits from the bottom. And I will also let the wine kind of cook off a bit. And then I'm going to add my garlic. I just crushed them, so I have 2 cloves. My bay leaf, I'm using 3 because they're small, but if you have a larger one, just 1, maybe 2. The thyme, I'm just doing the whole sprig. And the peppercorns, which you can't even see because they're black. But now that this is kind of, the smoke is settling a little bit, I'm going to add my beef broth. And I also have a kettle of hot water on the side just in case I need more liquid, but I'm going to start with this. I'm also going to add my serrano. My serrano, I've just made a little cut into it, so I don't want to chop it, I just want to leave it whole. I'm going to let this kind of come to a simmer, and I will taste it to check for seasoning. So I had adjusted some seasonings, and if you want to know what they were, I will have it in the description box. And I went ahead and added everything except the sweet peas. So I'm just going to kind of make sure that things get nestled in here, and then I'm going to put it in the oven covered, and it will be in there for like an hour and a half. And this way the vegetables will also flavor the liquid. Okay, so it's been about an hour and a half. I just want to take it out of the oven and check on it. Okay, I'm going to cook it a bit longer, but I just kind of wanted to see how it's coming along, and it looks really good. And I'm gonna just taste the broth just to see if it needs any more salt. So I did add a little bit more of mushroom seasoning that I have, just a little bit, to kind of emphasize the mushroom flavor, and it complements the beef flavor as well. I put the lid on again, and I put it back in the oven, and it'll probably be in there for another hour or so. Okay, so I've taken this out, and now it's been, I'm gonna say like 2.5 hours total time, and it looks good. I do want to thicken up the gravy or the sauce, so I have my pot. My pot is very hot, but I did turn on the stove, and I'm going to be combining some cornstarch with some water to add to this. So this is my cornstarch and water. I have about a tablespoon of each, and I'm just going to mix this first so it gets really smooth, and I will add it to my pot. Just gonna... Okay. And then after I drop this in, I want to stir it around, and I'm going to continue cooking this for another couple minutes on the stove before serving. The other thing I want to do is drop in my peas so they can warm through. And they don't need a lot of time. Then, of course, just some fresh parsley to kind of brighten up the dish. And this is the finished product. Oh, that's a little spicy, but it's good. I do like it. I have some bread on the side with it as well, so that'll kind of absorb the heat. I forgot to fish out my serrano pepper, and as I was stirring, it basically fell apart. So this is a bit spicy now. Adding the serrano pepper is optional. You don't have to put it in. I put it in. I happen to like the flavor. But this turned out really good, really satisfying, really warming. If the weather is kind of crummy, again, this is something really good to make. If you're at home self-quarantining from the coronavirus, or you're just home just because, this is a really really great meal to do, especially if you have a nice block of time. This ended up cooking for about 2.5 hours, and I was making a small pot. If you're making a larger portion, I would suggest even 3.5. This is also something that would freeze really well, so you can portion it out, put some in the freezer, and have some for dinner. Now, typically I do prefer to serve a stew with like an egg noodle, but I don't have that right now. It'll probably be a long time before I get that, so I'm just going to be eating it with some bread. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as usual, I will have a described recipe down below, so please check that out. I hope that everyone is doing well, and I will see you next time. Have a good night. FYI, I happen to like the thickness. That is what I was looking for. Now, the peppercorn, they're floating around in there too, so just be mindful when you are eating it to maybe pick them out, because if you bite into it, it will clear your nostrils.